Right now, some professionals are pulling ahead, not because they're smarter, but because they're building one skill most people are ignoring. And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to catch up. And this isn't about AI tools, coding, or technical certifications. This is about something that quietly determines who gets visibility, who gets influence, and who gets pulled into opportunity. And once you understand this skill, you'll start noticing it everywhere in promotions, in leadership decisions, and in who advances the fastest. And let me show you exactly what it is and why building it early gives you a real career advantage. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Thomas Schmidt, and I've spent more than 3 decades as a technology and business executive, including roles as COO, CMO, and VP Product, leading teams through multiple industry and technology disruptions. Today, I work with organizations to optimize how they manage technology, streamline operations, and sharpen both marketing and product strategy. But I also work with mid-career professionals who are trying to understand why the rules they followed successfully for years suddenly stop working. Okay, let's begin. Why the career playbook is changing. For a long time, career success followed a predictable formula. You specialized, you stayed in your lane, you mastered a role, you became reliable, and consistency was rewarded. But that model is breaking down. Not because people suddenly became less capable, but because the nature of work itself is changing faster than the systems built to manage it. Roles evolve more quickly. Teams reorganize more often. Projects are shorter and more cross-functional. And automation is steadily absorbing routine tasks. And in this environment, being good at your job is simply no longer enough. The professionals who are advancing are the ones who understand how value actually moves through the organization. And that's where the real advantage begins. Why this shift is quiet but accelerating. Okay, what makes this shift so dangerous for many professionals is that it doesn't arrive with a warning label. There's no announcement that says, your role is becoming less valuable. Instead, it shows up quietly in fewer invitations to important meetings, in decisions happening without your input, in projects being redesigned around automation, in leadership gravitating towards different profiles. At first, it feels subtle, but over time, the pattern becomes clear. The people who understand context, who can connect work across different departments and translate business priorities, start getting closer to strategic conversations. Everyone else stays focused on execution, and that gap doesn't appear overnight. It grows gradually, and by the time most professionals realize what's happening, the early advantage window has already narrowed. The skill, contextual intelligence. Okay, so what's this skill, you might ask? Well, the skill creating this advantage is something called contextual intelligence. In simple terms, it's the ability to understand things like how your work fits into the bigger picture, how different teams depend on each other, how leadership makes trade-offs, and how decisions ripple through the business. It's the difference between saying, I've completed my assignment, versus I understand why this project exists, who it affects, and what success actually looks like. That shift changes how people perceive you, and perception drives opportunity. Why this becomes a competitive advantage. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Technical skills are becoming easier to replicate. AI can already do things like generate reports, analyze data, automate workflows, assist with writing, design, and coding. But what technology still struggles with is context. It doesn't understand organizational profiles, human dynamics, political constraints, strategic nuance, and unintended consequences. So when you develop contextual intelligence, you become valuable in a way that tools can't easily replace. You stop being seen as a task executor and start being seen as someone who understands how decisions should be made. And that's where the leverage sits. And leverage is what accelerates careers. Real world example. Same role, different outcome. Imagine 2 professionals in the same role. Same team, same responsibilities, similar experience. They both deliver their work on time. They both meet expectations. But one of them understands how their work affects revenue, anticipates downstream impact, proactively flags risks, and adapts priorities based on business goals. Over time, leadership starts involving that person earlier. They get visibility, they get trust, they get stretch opportunities. Same job title, very different trajectory. And that difference isn't talent, it's context. How leadership actually evaluates value. Here's something most professionals don't realize. When leaders evaluate talent, they rarely think in terms of how good this person is at their job description. Rather, they think in terms of who helps us make better decisions, who reduces risk, who understands the trade-offs, who can operate with incomplete information. Those are contextual skills. They're not always written in performance reviews, but they do drive promotion outcomes. This is why two people with similar resumes can experience completely different career paths. One is seen as reliable, the other one is seen as strategic. And strategic people get pulled into opportunity faster. Why building this skill now matters. Here's where the urgency comes in. Contextual intelligence is not something you download. It's built through exposure, experience, observation, and repetition, which means time becomes a multiplier. The earlier you start building it, the larger the advantage becomes. And if you wait until your role becomes unstable, your company restructures, your industry shifts, or your job is threatened, well, you'll be trying to build a skill under pressure. And pressure limits learning. That's why smart professionals start early, when they still have room to experiment, ask questions, and grow safely. How smart professionals are building it. Okay, let's get practical. Here's what people with strong contextual intelligence do differently. They don't just ask, what's my task? They ask, what problem are we solving? Who ultimately benefits from this? What happens if this goes wrong? And how does this align with business priorities? They intentionally expand their exposure. They attend meetings outside of their core function. They volunteer for cross-team projects. They build relationships beyond their immediate manager. Not to look busy, but to understand how this system actually works. Practical steps you can start today. Step 1. Learn how your organization makes money. Not your department metrics, the real revenue engine. Ask things like, where does profit come from? Which products or services drive growth? Where does leadership invest resources? When you understand this, your decisions become smarter automatically. Step 2. Map upstream and downstream impact. So for every major task, ask, who depends on this? What breaks if this is delayed? What decisions does this enable? This trains you to think in systems and not in silos. Step 3. Build cross-functional exposure. Look for opportunities that involve multiple departments, expose you to leadership discussions, and expand your perspective. These experiences accelerate learning far faster than staying isolated in one single role. Step 4. Upgrade your questions. Instead of asking only things like, how do I complete this? You need to start asking, why are we prioritizing this now? What does success really look like? What trade-offs are we making? These questions signal maturity and leadership potential. Common mistakes that slow people down. Okay, well, now let's talk about what holds people back. First, staying inside of your comfort zone. If you only work with the same team, the same tools, and the same problems, well, your perspective stays narrow. Second, focusing only on efficiency. Being fast at tasks is useful, but speed without context doesn't create leverage. Third, avoiding strategic conversations. Many professionals think, that's above my pay grade. Well, but that mindset keeps you invisible. The people who grow fastest lean into these conversations early, even when they don't fully understand everything yet. They listen, they observe, they learn. Why this future-proofs your career? Well, when roles evolve, and they will, professionals with contextual intelligence adapt faster. They can reposition themselves, shift responsibilities, identify emerging opportunities, and stay relevant through change because they understand the environment, not just the assignment. That flexibility is becoming one of the most valuable career assets you can build. The cost of waiting. If you ignore this skill, here's what often happens. You become extremely good at a narrow function. But when disruption arrives, automation absorbs part of your role. Organizational priorities shift, and restructuring changes team structures. And suddenly, you're competing with professionals who already understood the bigger picture. That gap is very hard to close quickly, which is why early action matters. The advantage window. Well, here's the key takeaway. Professionals gaining the biggest advantage right now are not necessarily the most technical. They're the ones building contextual intelligence early. They understand how work connects. They anticipate change. They position themselves strategically. So if you want to stay competitive, this is one of the smartest skills you can start building today. And if this helps you think differently about your career strategy, please hit that like button. It really helps more professionals find this type of content. And if you want practical insights on staying relevant, competitive, and future ready, please subscribe to the channel. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and keep building the skills that give you real leverage. And I'll see you in the next one.